All right, what's up, guys? Good morning. Hopefully, yesterday was a success. Hopefully, y'all had plenty of time to watch the video and also put down the things that y'all need help with. I realized after I made the video that once I uploaded it to YouTube, it was like super bright, and so I'm trying a different layout. Whenever I become YouTube famous, hopefully I'll have like the circle light and fancy technology. Right now my phone is on top of my cup of pens and highlighters, and then my laptop and this lamp is my light source. And so we're gonna get to it. And so what I have for you today is I made a Google Doc of everything that y'all sent yesterday, which was super helpful. The encouraging thing was a lot of you did not say the same thing. Some of you said the same thing, but not everyone. And so it's not like everyone had trouble with the same thing, but a couple of y'all did put the same thing. And so that allows me to go, okay, I need to really focus on that. And so what I'm going to do is I took down everything that y'all wrote. And if any of you put anything that was similar to someone else, I just put it in the same category. I wrote some notes, and I'm just going to go over them. And hopefully this video doesn't take very long. What I do want you to do is I do want you to get out your notes and take notes on this. The hard part about this is I'm not going to have any visuals for you. I haven't figured out how to... When I video on my laptop, it's like super blurry, and when I try to screen share, it just like screws everything up. And so I'm not going to be able to like share my screen and show you like visual examples and type things out for you until we Zoom on Friday. I'm trying to figure out how I can set it up to where I can Zoom with you possibly Thursday instead of doing another video. I will let you know, but as of now, you don't have any homework or like an assignment to do other than study. What I'm thinking about doing, and I might, change this a little bit, is sharing this Google Doc with you and making it editable, not editable, making it to where you can edit it. What is the word? Making it to where you can edit it so that it's kind of like a ongoing study guide for y'all to have as a class for your exam on Monday. And so I think that'll help y'all. It'll help me kind of like put things all in one place, and it's gonna help y'all put together on this document questions that you have and things that you as a class like need help on. And so hopefully now you're getting out your notes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each one of these. I'm going to try to be brief, but I'm going to try to really give you like the main information you need so we don't waste any time. And so what I've tried to do is every like thing that y'all have given me, I've tried to come up with like a full definition that I want you to like, this is your definition for this concept. And then I've tried to give you some examples, and I'm going to try to go through the examples as best I can. It's going to be difficult for me to go through some of them without any visuals for you, but hopefully my narrative teaching style can kind of paint a picture for you. And then Friday when we Zoom, or possibly Thursday, this will be tomorrow for you, we'll be able to do that together, and I'll share my screen and I can really show you some stuff. Okay, so the first thing that a lot of y'all put was something that I expected was the difference between the different types of states and how nations and nation states and stateless nations and multination states. I understand that that's confusing. The easiest way for you, I think, to study this is to have your definition of nation and definition of state like really solid. So whenever you are presented with a term like a multinational state or a multination state or a stateless nation, you know what a state is and you know what a nation is. And so you can just infer in your head what a stateless nation is. Okay. So your definition of nation that I want you to write down is, and hopefully you already have this in your notes, but I really want y'all to lock this down, is a group of people bound together by a common sense of common culture and that can include language, history, religion, whatever, typically the same ethnicity, and is attached to a homeland. Okay, that is your definition of nation. Okay, now I understand that that is quite different than your typical thought of what a nation is, which is like the United States of America is a nation. Your definition of nation, here it is, I'll say it again slowly: a group of people bound together, so together, by some sense of common culture or ethnicity, and ethnicity, which can include language, history, religion, and they are attached to a homeland. Okay, so that is what a nation is. Okay, common people held together by culture. All right, a state is a globally recognized entity, which is like a country. Okay, and so whenever you hear state, you might think Louisiana. Louisiana is a state, but your definition of state for this class is a globally recognized entity that is like a country. Okay, and so a nation state is a group of people held together by this common culture, and they form a country. Okay, and so your example for a nation state would be like Japan. Japan is mostly made up of people who are ethnically and culturally Japanese. They are nationally Japanese, and Japanese is a globally recognized state. They are a country. Okay, so that is a nation state. A multinational state or a multi-nation state. Jolie, I noticed that you put both of those as your question: multinational state, and multi-nation state. Those are the same thing. Multinational state or multi-nation state are the same, and that is just more than one nation, so more than one group of people held together by a common culture in one country, in one state. And the best example of that is us, the United States. We are definitely not just one state made up of one culture or one nation, right? We have multiple groups of people here held together by a common culture and ethnicity, right? Canada is a great example of that. Russia is a great example of that. Brazil is a great example of that. Those are all multi-nation states. A stateless nation is a common group of people held by a common culture who do not have a state that recognizes that nation as a country. Okay, and so the best example of that is the Cherokee Nation in America. They are a common or people bound together by that common culture of, the Cherokee Nation, Native American, but they do not have like a border defining country state that is globally recognized. They have territory in America, and we're going to come back to Cherokees whenever we talk about autonomous regions, which is next. But those are an example of stateless nation. There's tons of other examples, but that's the best one that I think regionally you and I can you and I can agree on. So stateless nations are those groups of people who do not have a globally recognized state or country that their homeland is based on. Okay. So hopefully that answered your question. Guys, I'm telling you, the best way to study that is to really nail down your definition of nation and nail down your definition of state. And so any combination of those words or phrases or terms that gets thrown at you, you can really nail because you got it. Okay, moving on. I'm gonna try to go fast. Okay, so if you're taking notes, I would definitely recommend freehanding it. Obviously nothing's on the board right now other than my face, and so you're really just relying on what I'm saying. A lot of these are in your notes already, and so another good tool that you could be doing right now is getting out your notes that you previously had and just adding on to them. However you want to do that. I'm going to try to put a little intermediate period in between each term or thing that I talk about so y'all can write some more. And be talking amongst yourself if if someone has the notes or if someone needs anything, that always helps. So someone asked autonomous regions, what they are, what's included in the regions, and how they are formed. And so this is something we took notes on. I remember, Julie, I think you were absent this day. So the word autonomous, the key word in autonomous is auto, which means you are self sustained. If you're autonomous, that means you make your own decisions. You're your own person, right? You're your own thing, right? And so, most adults are autonomous. They make their own decisions. They spend the money how they want to. They are free. They are their own. So autonomous regions, here's your definition. I'm going to go slow. An area of a country. Okay, so not a whole country. A country is obviously autonomous, right? So that's not what an autonomous region is. An autonomous region is an area of a country that has a degree of autonomy. Okay, so a degree of freedom, or has freedom from an external authority. Okay, so the best regional example of this is Quebec. So Quebec is a province of Canada. It's in the northeast, and it is very culturally different than the rest of Canada. It speaks a different language than the majority of Canada. It has a different measuring system. It has different laws, and they are given that autonomy from the the state of Canada, the country of Canada. Another example is Hong Kong. This is something that we talked about together as a class, and I think y'all had some homework about this. Hong Kong is a city that is located in mainland China. It's a coastal city, but they are not a Chinese city. They are located on mainland China, but they are not a Chinese city. They are an autonomous region. They are given their own. They have their own money, their own culture. They have different demographics as China, but they are located in China. And because they are given that freedom of self-governing, they are classified an autonomous region. Now, this is something that I really want y'all to, and a Cherokee Nation could be also classified as this. The reservations that are set up in the Midwest in America, they have their own laws. They even have their own police department in the Cherokee Nation. And so America gives them that autonomy. Now, it's kind of ironic because the Cherokee Nation is not a globally recognized state, and they are inside America and are given that autonomy by America. And so if you're given that autonomy by an external force, do you really have autonomy? It's an interesting philosophical and geographical question. This is not to be confused with with a place like the Vatican City, which we're about to get to in a second when we talk about enclaves. The Vatican City is a globally recognized state, and so they are given autonomy not by an external force, but because they are a state in and of itself. The difference between the Vatican City and Cherokee Nation and Hong Kong is they are a globally recognized state. They just happen to be located inside of another state. Okay, and so if this card right here, I'm improvising. If this card right here is Italy, the Vatican City is like this dot right there. The white that you see is a country. That green that you see is a country. They are both separate countries. The green just happens to be totally located inside of the country of Italy. And so that is an example of an enclave, and we're going to get to that in a second. But an autonomous region, the thing that I would want you to really nail down is your definition of autonomy. Like, what does it mean to be autonomous? And to know that autonomous regions are not countries, because obviously countries are autonomous, right? They make their own laws. They have their own citizens, their own traditions and customs. An autonomous region is a region inside of a country that is given autonomy by the country. I know I'm talking really fast, and feel free to pause and rewind me if you need to. But I'm already at 15 minutes, and I'm only on the first page, and so trying to explain this the best that I can while also trying to keep it brief. Okay. So I would really nail down that definition of autonomous so that you understand the full meaning, okay? Next is delimited and demarcated boundaries, and I believe Jolie asked what are they examples and their significance. Okay, so delimited boundaries are boundaries that are drawn on a map per an agreement. That's it. Delimited boundaries are boundaries that are drawn on a map per an agreement. Typically, that agreement is a treaty after a war. And so, for example, my American history class right now we're talking about World War I, And after World War One, a treaty was signed called the Treaty of Versailles. And Germany had to give up a ton of land after World War One. And so all the countries at that treaty in Versailles had to agree on what Germany's boundary would be. And so that would be a delimited boundary. The reason why it's called that is because most of the time you are limiting the amount of land a country is having by marking a boundary. Very rarely are you expanding land unless you win a war, right? So to contrast that with a demarcated boundary is a visually marked boundary. Okay, so the way that I remember this is demarcated, the mark, a mark or a market. A demarcated boundary is something like a fence or a wall. It is something that you can see, a boundary that you can see in real life, not on a map. You probably can see it on a map too, but a demarcated boundary is you can look up and you can see the boundary. And so the Berlin Wall is a great example of this. The Berlin Wall that separated East Berlin and West Berlin. The wall that is between parts of Mexico and the United States is an example. The demilitarized zone and separating North Korea and South Korea is split by a group of fences and boundaries that you can physically see. And so that's the difference between those. Delimited is boundaries are ones that are drawn on a map per an agreement, usually a treaty, and demarcated is ones that you can see visually. Can a delimited boundary also be a demarcated boundary? Yes. Can a demarcated boundary also be a delimited boundary? Yes. But we have to distinct the two because they are different. Okay? All right, how globalization affects smaller countries or countries that are not very developed. Great question. So the very idea of globalism is the effects of what is going on that's important in the world are happening globally, right? It is being spread throughout the globe. And so just by its definition of globalization, those smaller countries will be affected because they are in the globe, like they are being affected by what's going on in the world. And so the best example of this is the video that we watched it was the Fox Boundaries video, which talked about the people in Nepal. And so Nepal, I really wish I had something to draw and show you here. Maybe this pen's better. So Nepal is a stateless nation. It is a group of people that's between India and China that do not have a recognized state. They used to, they don't anymore. And so here's Nepal, here's India, and here's China, okay? And as you can see, China and the Indian border go through the people of Nepal's, territory, I guess. And remember, those people in Nepal, they lived in villages, and their whole idea was they wanted to separate from modernization, globalization. They wanted to keep to their religious customs. But because China and India were growing so much, they wanted to form trade routes between the border of China and India. Well, who lives at the border of China and India? The Nepalese people. And so Nepal, a very, very small group of people, they're not even a nation. They are a nation. They're not even a state, are being affected by globalization. And so it's a great question, how globalization affects smaller countries. It affects them through trade, through infrastructure. China was actually building roads with their own money for Nepal. And so sometimes they can be positively affected, sometimes they can be negatively affected. One of the ways that they're negatively affected is they're losing that, cultural tradition of being away from modern trade and modern technology like they wished. Globalization also spreads religions to those smaller countries and smaller regions, or regions that are kind of isolated from the world. One of the biggest impacts, or one of the things that impacts globalization the most is is money, right? It's the reason why all of those tribes in the rainforest are being discovered and are having contact with, is because there are raw materials and resources in the rainforest, and we want them. And in order for us, a modernized country like America, to get to them, we have to negotiate and speak with these people who live there, who have lived there for thousands of years and don't have any outside world contact. And so definitely smaller regions and smaller areas are affected by globalization because of mostly economics, sometimes power, sometimes boundaries. How often do boundaries change for a country or a state besides the U.S.? It depends. This is a great question. It depends. In places like Europe, pretty frequently. One of the biggest ways that boundaries can change is war. And Europe has had many global conflicts happen in Europe in the past 100 years. And I wish I could show you a map. There is a map of Europe in 1914, and then a map of Europe in 2014. So 100 years, and it is two completely different places, boundaries wise. In the United States, our states' boundaries don't really change that much. As soon as we sign the ratification of a state, or we annex a territory and make it a state, we really don't change the boundary. And so a good hypothesis is a place where war happens frequently, so do the boundaries. They change frequently. And so that's the best example I can think of. Gerrymandering. Chloe asked about gerrymandering. And so gerrymandering is something that affects you directly. Gerrymandering is when you manipulate the boundaries of an electoral constituency. And so you don't actually change the boundaries of like a state. You change the boundaries of an elected or electoral like region where you elect senators and representatives to favor one party. And so if you remember what I drew on I'm not going to try to do it on a sheet of paper. When I drew on the board, and it showed how even in a state that was mostly Republican, the Democrats could alter the boundaries of the electoral regions to make it to where it's a Democratic state, and vice versa. The Republicans in a majority Democratic state, Republicans can draw the map so that they can elect more representatives to make it a Republican state. This happens all the time. This is actually one of the biggest things in Texas. So many people believe that Texas is majority, just people-wise, Democrats. And you could look this up. But because of gerrymandering, because of the manipulation of those boundaries, Republicans always win, or typically win, in Texas because of those historical boundaries that are being drawn. And so I would highly encourage you to look up the district of Austin and San Antonio. It is crazy how it does not look like a congressional district. Our congressional district looks pretty normal here in Shreveport. It's pretty big, to be honest. That one is not. It's like a straight line. It's pretty wild. So gerrymandering is when you affect and change or manipulate the boundaries of a constituency, political constituent. Y'all know I can't talk. A region of electoral significance in order to change the electoral process. All right. Exclaves and enclaves. These are kind of complicated. I'm gonna explain it to you. I might have to go and kind of table this for when I can show you some visuals. Here's your definition for an enclave. An enclave is a portion of a territory within or surrounded by a larger territory whose inhabitants are culturally or ethnically distinct. Okay? A portion of a territory within or surrounded by a larger territory whose inhabitants are culturally or ethnically distinct. The Vatican City is the best example of this. The Vatican City is, here's Italy. It is surrounded by another total region or territory, and its cultural and ethnic characteristics are distinct from its surrounding areas. That's what an enclave is. An exclave is very similar, and and here's your definition for an exclave. A portion of territory of one state completely surrounded by territory of another or others as viewed by the home territory. You might be thinking to yourself, that sounds exactly like what an enclave is. Here's the difference. The enclave is typically surrounded by the entire country or area. An exclave is when a portion of that territory is surrounded by that state. And the best example of this is there are some areas in Pakistan that are culturally Pakistani, but are located in places like Turkey and Iraq. This is best explained when I can show you a visual of the two examples and show you the differences between the two examples. But those are your definitions. If you look up exclaves and enclaves, AP Human Geography, there's a ton of great stuff that you can look at. But those are your base definitions for you to know. We can come back to that. All right, NeoColonialism. This is something that is very prevalent today and was very prevalent in the 21st century, or the 20th and 21st century. So your definition is the use of economic, political, cultural, or other pressures to control or influence other countries, especially foreign dependencies. Let me read you that again. Your definition for neocolonialism is the use of economic, political, cultural, or other pressures to control or influence other countries, especially foreign dependencies. Notice the one thing I didn't say when to control or influence is war or intimidation or attack. Typically with imperialism, it's you show up with guns and you go, hey, we would like to colonize you. And if you disagree, we will go to war. Neocolonialism is the idea that you can do other things to pressure or control a territory without having to use your military. Economic, political, cultural, other pressures. The best example of this is, so we know that Africa, the boundaries in Africa were drawn by European colonists. Well, when those African countries were given their independence, they struggled heavily with things like economics and their political structure because they were kind of left in ruin by those European colonists. Well, the French, for example, the French would go, oh, you need us back to help you? Oh, well, let's give you some money to help you. We can write your constitution for you. All we ask is that you send us money every year. You see where this can lead to. That leads to having control without actually saying, hey, you're my colony. And so it's kind of a new type of imperialism, but we certainly see that it happens. But the key thing is that it is using the same idea of imperialism without using military force. It's using economic, political, or cultural maneuvers to control or influence a territory. All right, a theocracy is a system of government in which priests rule in the name of God. It is basically when the church, and that could be any church, that can be a Christian church, a Muslim church, any type of religion, and the religious leaders control or govern that territory. So the best example of this is the Vatican City. The Vatican City is led by the Holy Roman Catholic Church, who's obviously led by the Pope. Another example of this is Saudi Arabia, who is led by the Saudi Kingdom, which is Islamic, and they are priests in the Nation of Islam, or the religion of Islam. Those are interchangeable. And so a theocracy is just any government, a system of government in which the religion and the religious leaders are the people who govern that area. Cool. All right, we're approaching 30 minutes, so I'm going to try to go fast. All right, Centripetal Force is a nationalistic forces that bind a country together. So some examples are history, language, national institutions, or government legitimacy. Okay. Centripetal force is basically things that a nation has in common that brings people together. That's literally it. A centripetal force are nationalistic forces or things in a country or an area that bind people together. What binds people together? The language they speak, the religion that they worship or that they practice, history, government agreements. Centripetal forces are just things that bind people together in an area. I don't want you to overthink that. Okay, it's just a force that brings people together. Okay. All right, someone asked about the Silk Road. I'm going to come back to that because that's a great example, but I'm going to try to go through some of these definitions before I come back to that. So if I have time, I'll come back to that. All right, someone asked about the Domino Theory. So I touched lightly on that yesterday. So the Domino Theory it's easy to remember because what happens when you push a set of dominoes? they fall. The domino theory is that if one country develops a certain type of idea, specifically a type of government, the smaller or weaker countries around it will also adapt or fall to that type of government or change that happens in the original state. So the best example of this was during the Cold War, when there was a big fight between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union wanted to expand communism, or their idea of communism, and America wanted to spread democracy, or our idea of democracy. And so America put out this thing called the Domino Theory. And the Domino Theory was, we need to really protect the countries surrounding the Soviet Union, because if one of them falls to communism, what's going to happen? The states around it are also going to fall to communism, like dominoes. And so this theory is one that is typically used when looking at government practice as a whole, things like communism and democracy. Typically, it doesn't really have to do with economic structures or cultural things, but the domino theory is mostly used in the context of things like communism. All right, we talked about stateless nations already. Nationalism. So the key word in nationalism is not nation, it's nation. And nationalism, here's your definition, is the identification with one's own nation and supports for its interest, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. I'll say it again. Nationalism is the identification with one's own nation and support for its interest, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. And so nationalism is saying my country first. I'm sure you've all heard the saying America first. Nationalism is saying my country needs to expand, get better, improve, even if it means that other countries don't. Okay? My country's first. I have a strong sense of pride and acceptance in my country, and I want my country to succeed, even if it means to the detriment of other countries. And so we see that nationalism, if you're thinking for a second, you could see that nationalism could kind of justify some things. And so I want you to think for a second, what are some things that nationalism could justify? If you're saying, I want the best for my nation, even if it means the detriment of other nations. If you're thinking to yourself imperialism, colonization, or war, you're on the right track. Hopefully you're thinking that. The core periphery model. Okay, so when you're looking at your peripherals, you're looking at the things that are around you, right? So the core periphery model is here's your definition, and you should already have this in your notes, a model that describes how economic, political, and or cultural power is spatially distributed, so spatially distributed in the places around it, between dominant core regions and more marginal and dependent semi-peripheral and peripheral regions. And so the core periphery model is how things like economic, political, or cultural power is spread from core dominant regions to its smaller regions in its peripheries, okay? So let's say Shreveport. Shreveport is the big city. Blanchard, Keithville, Stonewall, Bossier, Benton, those are all smaller, not as core regions around Shreveport. And so if something happens economically, politically, culturally in Shreveport, according to the core periphery model, those smaller, more marginal regions will eventually develop those common cultural, economic, political traits. Okay. All right, trying to go fast here. Consequence and sub-consequence boundaries. I love that y'all are asking questions about the different types of boundaries. So the consequence boundary, here's your definition. So spelling it is C-O-N, consequent, C-O-N-S-E-Q-U-E-N-T, boundary, is a boundary line that coincides with a cultural divide, such as religion or language. I'll say that again. So a consequent boundary is a boundary line that coincides with a cultural divide, such as religion or language. The best example of this is there is a boundary between India and Pakistan. That boundary was drawn to separate the Hindu predominant culture of India and the Islam culturally dominant region of Pakistan. And so the boundary between India and Pakistan literally separates the majority of those religions. And so that is an example of a consequent boundary. A subsequent boundary are established after the settlement of an area. That's important to remember. A subsequent boundary are established after the settlement of an area. So after the original boundaries are drawn. It changes as the cultural landscapes changes and is drawn to accommodate developments due to a certain event such as war. The best example of this is Yugoslavia, the example that we watched on the documentary Once Brothers. Yugoslavia was at one point a unified nation that had a unified state that had multiple nations in it. The best examples are the Slavs and Croatia. And once that fell, even though that place was already settled, they had to rewrite those boundaries even after it was settled due to a certain event. And usually it's war. And they had a civil war in Yugoslavia, which led to the breaking up of those nations. And so, and states. And so that's consequent and subsequent boundaries. All right, I think the last thing that we're going to go over is a satellite state. A satellite state is a country that is formally independent in the world, but under heavy political, economic, or military influence or control from another country. I'll say that again. A satellite state is a country that is formally independent in the world, but under heavy political, economic, or military influence or control from another country. The best way to remember this, guys, is the satellites up in space. They are independent. They control the trajectory that they go on, but they're being controlled by NASA in Houston. And so a satellite state is an independent country or a formally independent country, but is under heavy political, economic, or military influence from another country. The best example of this is going back to the Cold War. So the Soviet Union was the core communist country in Europe and in Asia during that time. And there was countries surrounding the Soviet Union, like Korea, Vietnam, that were independent countries, but because of the power and the influence that the Soviet Union had over communism and over those countries economically, politically, and especially over their military, those countries were kind of being controlled by the Soviet Union. Cuba was a great example during that time as well. And so a satellite country is just like a satellite up in space. It's being controlled either economically, politically, or economic, politically, or under its military. Okay. All right, so I'm about 38 minutes. The two examples that I think it was Hayden and Sage, I believe, that they wanted me to go over was the Silk Road and apartheid. Those are two great examples that you can use on multiple DBQs and FRQs. I don't think I have enough time to really go into them. So what I'll do is sometime tomorrow on Thursday or Friday, I'll go over them with y'all because y'all do need to know those. And those are great tools to have in your back pocket for when you're answering questions. And also, hopefully y'all have some time left in class. Y'all can look those up on your own and do a little research. You don't really need to know those for the test. They're just great things to have in your toolbox to pull out as examples of globalization, ethnic cleansing, things like that. Okay, so I'm gonna end the video here. What I'm gonna try to do tomorrow for Thursday is hopefully try to Zoom with y'all while y'all are in class. If I can't get that to work, I'll make another video just like this. And then Friday, you and I will Zoom together at home because you won't be at school. I'll actually be at school. That's my last day. Thursday is my last day of quarantine. And so I'll actually be at school and y'all will be at home and we'll Zoom together and we'll hopefully answer all of your questions. Okay, so last thing. What I'm going to do right now, as soon as I end this video after I upload it, I'm going to share this document with you. And hopefully I'm going to be able, if I can figure it out, me and technology do not get along. If I can figure it out, I'm going to make it to where it's you can edit it, okay? And that way, this is going to be a living study guide. And so you put things on here that you want to know, other people can answer it, other people can add on to it. And this will be our living, breathing study guide that you can have for your test on Monday. And so hopefully by the time you're watching this, this will be up on Canvas for you to look at and kind of go over while I'm talking. And yeah, so guys, I will be near my phone and my laptop while you're viewing this. And so if you have any questions, just message me on there. Your exam on Monday will look like all the other exams that we've taken. And then we'll hit the ball rolling or hit the ground running on Tuesday with Unit 5, and we gotta really push it. And so I think we can do it. I miss you guys. Let me know if y'all have any questions, and I'll see y'all later.